Welcome to Church Experience Online. We're so happy you joined us today. As you watch this teaching video, if you have any questions or need help getting connected, please don't hesitate to reach out by phone or email. Also, our website is the best place to go if you would like to access helpful growth steps, resources, join a servant team, connect in a life group, get your questions answered, or support this movement financially by giving online. At the end of this teaching video, you'll hear one of our Church Experience worship original songs, and we hope that gives you an opportunity to worship and reflect on what you learned. Thanks again for joining us at Church Experience Online.
We've been on quite a trip together this summer. We've been journeying through the life of Joseph, learning valuable life lessons from his life as he tried to honor God and live for Him, so that we can do the same, follow and honor God in our life story. Well, let's summarize Joseph's life so far before we jump into today's lesson points. First of all, Joseph started out as the great-grandson of Abraham. His father, Jacob, loved Joseph so much, he favored him and gave him an ornate robe. Well, God gave Joseph something even better. He gave him some God-given dreams. But unfortunately, because of those God-given dreams, when he shared them with his family, well, his brothers didn't like those dreams so much because they meant the younger bro would be ruling over them one day. So they took that ornate robe and they threw Joseph in the bottom of a cistern. There he was left all alone. And we talked about how even when you feel all alone, you're not all alone because God's always with you. And Joseph knew that. And he went from the cistern to being sold into slavery, being shipped off to a foreign country, to Egypt. His brothers, they didn't like the idea of killing him, but they didn't want him around, so they got rid of him that way. But that was not the end of Joseph's story. He was sold into the house of the captain of the guard for Pharaoh. And his guy's name was Potiphar. And Potiphar saw that God's blessing was on Joseph's life because Joseph was faithful to carry the responsibilities that God put into his life. He didn't complain about the situation he was in and the circumstances. He responded well and he was faithful. And because he was faithful, God blessed him with more, and Potiphar put him in charge of his whole household. Unfortunately, Potiphar's wife started looking at Joseph, and she looked at him with that eye like, hey, I like this guy, and she started coming on to him. Well, Joseph was honoring to God and faithful to God, and he refused to be even around this woman who was trying to cheat on her husband with him. In fact, we talked about sexual integrity and just the integrity of our lives in general, and Joseph had that integrity, and he refused to be around her. Unfortunately, she falsely accused him, and Joseph ended up being thrown into jail by Potiphar. Well, there he is in jail. Again, something that he didn't deserve, but he was thrown into a bad situation. He remained faithful to God in that bad situation. And we're challenging you to be faithful in the situations that you go through in life, even when they're not ideal. Well, Joseph is there in the prison, and he's being entrusted with more responsibility, and he's managing this prison. He's in charge of this prison. Well, in that situation, two guys come to him, and they used to be employed by the king. They've temporarily been thrown in jail. They have these dreams, and Joseph interprets the dreams for them, and he says, if you ever get out, remember me. Remember me, I'm innocent, I'm stuck here. Well, they are released, as Joseph says. They get taken to Pharaoh, but they forget about Joseph, and there he is forgotten. He had to feel like that was the end of the road. You know, we're here in Key West, and this is literally the end of the road. If you're driving south from wherever up north you're coming from the Northeast or the Midwest, like this is as far south as you're going to be able to drive. And people take long trips to get here. But when you're in Key West, it literally is the end of the road, and it's a pretty great place. But it's the last stop. You're not driving any further south. This is it. Joseph may have felt that way. That was the end of the road for him. But we're going to learn some lessons from his life at the end of the road. In fact, I've titled today's message, Lessons from the End of the Road. Let's pick up the story in Genesis. Genesis chapter 41, verse 9. It says, Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew is there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. Verse 14, check this out. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Wow, what a transformation. Joseph has already been through so many changes. We've seen him go from a slave to a manager in Potiphar's house. We've seen him go from a prisoner to a manager of the prison. But now he's going from the prison to the palace. And he's standing before the most influential, most powerful person in that part of the world. And he's standing there, and it reminds us of what God is able to do. Because some of us may feel forgotten about. We're in a season of obscurity, and we feel like God's forgotten about our life story. He's forgotten about our journey. But that's not the case at all. In fact, you may want to write this down in your teaching notes. God takes responsibility for the life that's faithful to Him. God takes responsibility for your life as you are faithful to Him. You know, PK, one of my mentors, said that, God will always cover His guidance in your life. He won't cover your own direction, but He'll cover His direction in your life. He's got you. He's watching you. He's with you. And as you're faithful to Him, He's going to show Himself faithful to you. In fact, God is faithful to us even when we're not faithful. Even when we're stuck in our sin, He sent His Son Jesus to die on the cross for our sins because He loves us that much. And His love never fails. Well, I look back at the life of Joseph, and I see someone who prepared. They were faithful even in the seasons of obscurity in their life. When Joseph started out, he's 17 years old. And now at 30 years old, after 13 years of preparation, he's finally ready to step into a season where God's going to use him in an exponential way. But all throughout that journey, he was faithful to God, even in the little responsibilities that he was given. In fact, if you look at Luke chapter 16, verse 10, it tells us how we're supposed to live. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Well, Joseph was honest and faithful with the little that he had been given in Potiphar's house, in the prison. Now he's stepping into the palace and into greater opportunity. So let me ask you before we move on, are you being faithful with what God has given you? Are you being faithful with what He's entrusted you with? See, we learn over time that being faithful with little leads to more. This is one of the best lessons we can get from the end of the road. The prison could not separate Joseph from God's purpose. And no matter what prison you might feel like you're in right now, you need to know that it can't separate you from God and what He wants to do in your life. Prisons can feel confining, they can feel restricting, but did you ever think about how a prison can also be like a waiting room? You might feel stuck right now in your circumstances, but what if, like Joseph, God had you in a season of waiting because He was preparing something for you that He wanted to do in your life? What if the season you're going through that is uncertain, that's difficult, that's challenging, was actually sharpening you, making you better, making you stronger, growing your faith, growing your character? What if the prison is actually a form of a waiting room for God? What if it's not the cursed place that we think it is, and what if it's a place of preparation? That was certainly true in Joseph's life, and Joseph had an amazing opportunity to come and stand before the most powerful person in the world at that time. Genesis chapter 41, verse 15. This contains probably one of my favorite verses in this whole story of Joseph. Genesis 41:15. It says, so Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now, this is my favorite verse. I love this. Verse 16. I cannot do it. What? Joseph, this is your chance. He says, I cannot do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer that he desires. You know, the reason why I love this so much is because, see, Joseph's had a hard life. Maybe you can relate. Joseph's had nothing but setbacks in his life. God gave him a dream as a 17-year-old. And we talked about the first week how you probably have some dreams in your life. And Joseph had this dream, but then there was a betrayal from his family. They sold him into slavery. And then when he went off to slavery, he was faithful in that situation, but he was falsely accused by the wife of his master, thrown into jail where he was forgotten about by these two people who he had helped. So Joseph's had nothing but setbacks, but now, look, check it out. Now, Joseph is standing in front of the person who can fix all of his problems, the person who can make it right, the person who can bless him, hook him up. He's standing there, and that person's got a problem that Joseph has experience helping in. So he says, Joseph, can you help me? And what does Joseph say? I love it, and I can't believe it at the same time. He says, I cannot do it. Really, Joseph? And see, he hasn't lost his hope in God. And I kind of want to be real with Joseph. Don't you just want to pull up a chair with him and say, Joseph, let's talk about this. You're saying God's going to help you out. You're really going to play the God card right now? Are you sure that's the best move? Because this is the same God who allowed you to be sold out by your family into slavery. Like, that's the God that you're kind of relying on right now? This is the same God who allowed you to be falsely accused and thrown into jail. Are you sure that you want to play the God card right now? Because this is your chance to get yours. This is your chance to make it right. I mean, you've had nothing but setbacks and a bad life, so do something about it. This is your chance. Take your life and do something with it. But Joseph, he wasn't like that. He said, no, I can't do it, but God can. See, what you see inside that is amazing. He did not get angry all that time at God and curse God and blame God for his situation. No, instead, he kept faith in God even when his situation seemed really bad. If we could only have that kind of faith, even just a little bit of that kind of faith when we're going through hard times, instead of drifting away from God, getting mad at God, forgetting about him, if we could just stay faithful when we go through the hard times. Joseph not only stayed faithful in those times, but he stayed close to God, and so much so that when he was given his opportunity, he said, I can't, but God can. See, he never lost faith. He never lost faith. If we could only be like that, what would God do through us if we could have that kind of rock solid faith? See, God was present with Joseph, and Joseph deflected all the credit and all the power to God. He didn't take it for himself. It's important because in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18, it says, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. See, pride's dangerous because confidence, which is good, you should have confidence, turns into conceit when there's pride. And the Bible says where there's pride, there's strife and there's problems. And here it says that pride is what precedes a fall in your life. Well, what are we talking about with pride? It's that self-dependence, that self-reliance. I got this. I don't need anybody. I can do it. And you'll have those moments. You might not be standing before the most powerful person in the world like Joseph was, but you'll have your moment where you can seize it and it's all about you. Or you can say, you know what? This is all God. You still walk in confidence, but no, this is all. I give him all the glory. I give him all the credit. I love when I see people do that. Maybe you see a Christian athlete. They get an interview afterwards and they've had a great game and say, I give all the praise to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. It's rare that you hear that, but when you do it, it always does something inside me. It's like, man, that's so cool. Because they're gifted and they could easily grab the interview and say, hey, yeah, I know I'm all that and I've practiced hard and it's all about me. And yeah, it took a long time to get here, but we won, you know? And it's like, I want to give the credit where credit's due. There's somebody that gave me the ability to run and jump and all the things that I'm doing to get here today. And for you in your life, never forget where all the glory comes from. Never forget who allowed you to get where you are, to live, to exist, to breathe, to have a roof over your head, to have air in your lungs. Everything good we have in our life comes from God. Have you forgotten that? It's easy to forget. How can we have a filter to help us in the good times and the bad times that's consistent no matter what we go through? Well, I came across one, it was delivered by Mark Batterson, a great Christian author. He said this, I want to share it with you, it's so rich. He said, I try to treat compliments the same way I treat criticism. I deflect them to God. If I don't, then criticism turns into cynicism and praise turns into pride. You see what he's saying? He's saying, I have to deflect everything to God. That's my filter. That's my filter because if I don't deflect the bad things to God, then that's going to bring me down. All the criticism, all that stuff, it's going to turn into cynicism. It's going to be bad. At the same time, if the praise that comes, the good things that come in my life, if I don't deflect that to God, that's going to turn into pride. Look what I've done. Look who I am. So in all things at all times, like the Bible says, I do all unto the glory of God. That's the filter. Like that's it. And Joseph had that. And look what God did in his life. He took him from the prison to the palace in a moment. He did amazing things in his life because he gave God the glory. Are you deflecting the credit in your life to God? You know, it's easy to forget, isn't it? So quickly we forget the things we used to pray about that are now a part of our life. and they become familiar and they rob us of the glory of God and who he is and what he's done. What in your life right now have you forgotten about? Maybe you used to be single and you're praying to find somebody, and now you have somebody, but you're praying for kids and you're focused on the next season, but you forgot how amazing is that person that you're with. Maybe you've kind of come through life and you've had a successful career and you're so worried about and focused on retirement that you forgot God's provided a great job and he's given you the ability to provide and to put food on the table. What a gift. What blessing in your life have you forgot about because you're so worried about what's coming, what's down the road, what's in the future? Well, Joseph gave God credit. He gave him glory for all that was going on in his life. Well, let's look back at this again in Genesis chapter 41. And this is probably one of the best parts of the story because we see Joseph get what he finally deserves. Genesis chapter 41 and verse 41. Joseph has given Pharaoh the interpretation of the dream that he had through God's supernatural helping him. And this is what God does to bless Joseph. Genesis 41, verse 41. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and he put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and he put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command. And people shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Wow. So he basically said, Joseph, you're the man. Everybody say, you're the man. Thanks, that feels good. I've always wanted that my whole life. I'm just kidding. I'm just messing around. But that's what he said to him. He said, Joseph, you're the man. Like whatever you say goes. And he decked him out with jewelry and everything. He's like, here you go. The kingdom is yours. And this is kind of good to see, isn't it? Because it makes you breathe easy. Because when you've had a hard life, when things have not gone how you want to, it's nice to see somebody who's been faithful being fruitful. It's nice to see good things happening in their life. And it's good because Joseph didn't deserve to be betrayed by his family. That's messed up. He didn't deserve to be falsely accused and thrown in jail. That's wrong. That's unjust. Joseph didn't deserve to be forgotten about by his friends. He'd helped his friends and they left him there. But now finally Joseph gets what he deserves. That dream he had when he was 17 is finally starting to happen. It's coming true. It's so good to see that. And you know what? You can breathe easy, can't you, as a believer when you think about your life? Because you know even if you're going through a hard time, that's how it's going to work out for you. Not in the same way as Joseph. In fact, your whole life, I hate to tell you this part first, your whole life could be miserable. It could be. I hope it's not. But it could be. I hope it'll get better, but your whole life could be tough. But what we're promised in the Bible is that we have a home prepared for us. We talk about welcome home here. Our real home is in heaven. We have something to look forward to that's better than this life, and it's unending. It's forever. It's eternal, and it's paradise. And God's presence is there. That's all we need, but it's a beautiful, amazing, inspiring place. Listen, how does the Bible talk about heaven? It's better than any eye has seen or any mind has imagined. How good of a place can you imagine? Come on, think about it. It's better than that. The worst thing in heaven, the thing that you walk on, the worst thing is made of gold. The streets are of gold. That's the worst thing there is in heaven, and it's made of gold. Like, how good is heaven? Like, really? And it's forever. I can't even comprehend something that has no end. Everything in this life has an end, and it has no end. So you know it's going to get better, and it kind of, when you're going through hard times, that just helps you kind of breathe a little deeper. It's okay. It's all right. I don't like this, but instead of getting all frustrated and angry about this situation that's not going how I want, it's okay. It's okay. My health is going to fail at some point. I am going to die. Life is not going to be perfect, but there is a perfect love that's compelling me forward, and there is a perfect place, and that's heaven because God's perfect presence is there, and it's going to get better. In the end, we know it's going to get better. The best is still coming, so I can celebrate in that. Man, it's good to see God do something good in Joseph's life, and the lesson I learned from this is that prisons can't overpower God's purpose. A prison can't overpower God's purpose. He was stuck in prison, but God's purpose still prevailed. Well, he had some success now, and I'm happy to see that for Joseph. So what should Joseph do now? He's had success. Should he just take it easy? Just soak it up, have a little me time, just revel in his glory. I mean, he didn't deserve all the bad things. Now he's got some good things. What should you do when things go well? All the things you've been praying for, when God blesses you, what should you do? Should you just enjoy the success? Well, success wasn't all God had planned for Joseph. In fact, he had a much bigger plan. Let's pick up the story in Genesis chapter 41, verse 53. It said, "The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food." Let's jump down to verse 57. "And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere." So because of Joseph's faithfulness, he had saved up this food from the 7 years of abundance. There was food not only for their whole nation, but for that whole region of the world. And everybody came to Egypt to get food so they could feed their families and they could survive. See, God was using Joseph in a huge way, in an epic way, to help many people. And Joseph was given success by God. God blessed him. But God also had a vision for his life that extended beyond his own life. See, he really did bless him in bringing him from a slave to a manager and then to being a ruler. But that vision wasn't just about Joseph. In fact, I put it this way in your teaching notes. Maybe you want to write this down. God's vision for me is bigger than me. It's bigger than me. It's not just about me. And you need to know that. And maybe you want to circle that word bigger. It's bigger than me. See, some people's whole world revolves around self-interest. They're absorbed with themselves. They think that the whole vision that God has for them is just about them and it's just for them. But none of us like to be around someone who's all about themselves. If someone's self-absorbed, we don't like being around them, and it's bad for their relationships. It ruins relationships. If you're self-centered, prideful, self-absorbed, what happens? Well, you're constantly offending other people and being offended. You're constantly worried about what other people think of you. You're neglecting relationships when you could be caring. You're worried about yourself and what others perceive you to be. See, self-interest is harmful to your relationships. It's not good to live a self-interested life where it's all about you. And Joseph, he was living a life that was not just for him. God did bless him, and we pray for God to bless us, but his blessing was not just for him. It was so that he could be a blessing to everybody else around him. Well, many people are busy managing things in their life, but a lot of those things are for them. What if we changed our perspective and we started managing our lives so that God could get more glory and more people could be helped? What if the whole purpose of our lives wasn't for ourselves, but what if it was so God could use us to bless others? See, me was not the ending point in Joseph's journey. We're here in Key West, and one of the cool spots that everybody comes to visit in Key West is the southernmost point. And the southernmost point is a little marker that people come and take a look at, and they take pictures in front of it. They give some video, and they just to show that they were there, the southernmost point in the continental U.S. And people will drive from far away, from Maine, from the Carolinas, from Tampa, to come here to the southernmost point and get their picture taken and to show that they have been as far south as you can possibly drive. And you know what? It's interesting. When you look around, you don't see sleeping bags. You don't see tents popped up on this corner. People come to this corner to get their picture taken with this marker, but then they move on. It's not the ultimate goal to come and stay here. It's a point you pass through. In fact, even on the marker itself, it says 90 miles to Cuba. It's pointing somewhere else. And the point is that this is not the ultimate destination, and neither are you. Some people live as if they are the final goal, that if they could just be successful, if they could just be blessed, if they could just have the ultimate life and have achievement, then that would please God alone. Just to have that. Like, all of our prayers seem to center around, hey, God, bless me. I want more. I want to accomplish. Give me a better job, a better life. And a lot of people, they think that me is the ultimate goal. But for God, me is too small of a vision for your life. God actually wants to use your life to be a blessing to other lives, to bring a big impact to others. He wants to use you, and not use you and discard you, but not in that kind of way. He wants to flow through you out of the overflow of what he's done to bless you so that you can be a blessing to other people around you. That's what God wants to do. In fact, a mentor of mine, Chip Henderson said that ministry is what you leave behind you as you follow Jesus. So as you follow him and as you're filled up and as he does bless you, you can be a blessing to others. You can be used by him in other people's lives. Well, here's a question to help you discern. How do you know if your vision's big enough? How do you know if it's about you or if it's about others beyond you? And the question is simply this: is your vision there to bring glory to yourself or glory to God? It's a good question to think about, your vision. And that's where this whole plan started, didn't it? It all started with a vision. It all started with a dream that Joseph had. But now he's getting the chance to see the fulfillment of that dream. And I hope you get to see the fulfillment of your dreams. But before we can get to the fulfillment of our dreams, when we start dreaming, everybody's thinking about what? They're thinking about what's next, what's next, what's next. But before you can get to what's next, you have to look at what's happening now. You have to focus on what's happening now. And Joseph, even though there was always a next in his life, he knew that God gave him this dream and there's this one day out there. He didn't live his life obsessed with someday. He lived his life focused on today. What's your today look like? I know that there's a someday out there maybe that you're working toward, praying for. There's something out there someday you hope happens or something that gets better. But what about today? How are you doing today? Because if you're not faithful with today, then you're undermining your hope of someday. See, God wants you to be faithful with what he's put in your hand now, and he's more concerned with what's happening now than he is with what's next. Because he knows that if you're not faithful now, then whatever's next, you won't be faithful with what's next. Joseph has an amazing opportunity. He's given this leadership position in this powerful nation. And there's gonna be a 7-year time of famine that's gonna come. This is why he was put in leadership, because he told Pharaoh that this is gonna happen. But before that gets there, preceding the difficult times, he's in a time of abundance. Look at what he does in Genesis 41, verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt, and he stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. They couldn't even measure how much abundance there was. Things were going so good. But you know what was gonna happen? They were gonna need all of that because the 7 years of famine would come later and just devastate their land. But because of Joseph, the people's lives would be spared. In fact, his own family would come from far away to Egypt to get grain. So God had gone ahead of Joseph and used him to bless his own family. His hardship, it was of God allowed it. He didn't do those things to Joseph, but he allowed those things to happen so that Joseph could not only rescue all the people of Egypt, but he could be a blessing to his own family. What if the hard things in our life, the difficult things, God was gonna flip that mess and make a message out of it? What if he was gonna flip it and use it in some way to be a blessing to people around us? What if it wasn't about us? What if it was about what God wanted to do through us? This is the danger when things get difficult of just being too internally focused. This is why I think it's good to stay in community and stay connected to other believers when you're going through hard times, because I've noticed over the years of pastoring that when people go through difficult times, it's real easy to get in a corner and get into self-pity and a victim mindset and to put your head down. And the devil loves that because he's got you right where he wants you. He's got you isolated. He's got you focused on you instead of on God and on others. But what if when we went through hard times, we said, God, how do you want to use this? How do you want to use me when I'm going through this difficult time? What do you want to do now? Now is not what I want. What I want's next. But how do you want to use this season? How do you want to work in my life now in this season? I put it this way in your teaching notes. Seasons change, but God's faithfulness never does. The seasons are always changing. They're always changing, but God's faithfulness will never change. You're gonna go through ups, you're gonna go through downs, and ultimately we know that this life's gonna end in death, so there's gonna be a down, but that's just preceding a huge up because we're gonna be welcomed into heaven for all of eternity if we're a follower of Jesus. And so there's gonna be ups and downs. The seasons are gonna change. There was an Eastern king who came to his wise men and he said, I want you to come up with a statement that I can look at and reflect on, a statement for our kingdom that will always be true at all times in every season. Whether things are going well in the kingdom or they're going poorly, this will always be true. I want you to think of a statement. What would you have said? Well, here's what they came up with. They came before the king and they said, King, we found a statement that will always be true at all times. It will humble you in times of pride. It will encourage you in times of discouragement. And they said, the statement that's always true is, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. What an encouraging statement for us in life when we're going through difficulties. You know what? If I just stay faithful to God, it's okay. It's going to get better. The best is yet to come. One day I'm going to be standing face to face with God and there'll be no more pain. I'm going through something right now, but this will pass. God, though, he won't change. My season's going to change, but God won't change. He's here with me now. He'll be with me there. And likewise, while I'm going through a good time here and I'm tempted to start chasing the ways of the world, oh, this is so good. Just remember, this too will pass. There'll be a day when I stand and give account to God for the life that I lived. And so if it's all about me and consuming and it's all about this life, this season's going to pass. This life's not forever. There'll be a day when my health does fail and when I stand before a holy God at the end of this life on the edge of eternity. So I want to live in a way to know that that day's coming. This too will pass. So I always want to be faithful. One of the women in our church, Lizette, she shared with me this backpack that she's had for a lot of years, and it's got these badges from all these different places that she's visited throughout the years, and she would take it with her wherever she goes, and when she goes on a trip, and she'll try to bring home a badge and put it on there, and she's got a lot of great memories from things she's done, places she's been, and experiences that she's had. And I was thinking, you know what, this is a lot like our life, isn't it? You know, we go through a season, and you might pick up a badge of, man, that was a great adventure. You might go through another season and you pick up a badge of, man, that was a hard time. Do you remember those seasons in your life? Like, man, I don't want to live through that one again. Then there's seasons you go through the great accomplishment. Man, we really did something there. That was a good season. Then you go through seasons of heartache, heartbreak, setback, betrayal, whatever it might be. You have all these different seasons of your life. But the amazing thing is that no matter what you go through, no matter what season you go through, kind of like this backpack has seen all of those seasons. Each one of these individual badges, some of them have seen more than the others, but some of them, the more recent ones, they haven't been there for the rest of the journey. You know, the different seasons, the different experiences you have, but this bag has been with her through everything that she's gone through. She's taken on every adventure, every journey. And here's the amazing thing is that God has been with you through every down, through every up. He's never gonna leave you. You need to know that his presence is powerful. And even though your season will change, God, his faithfulness, it will never change. So don't quit. Don't give up. Keep your trust in him in whatever season you go through on this road trip of life. This road trip has all kinds of interesting directions and changes and U-turns and roundabouts and long adventurous drives. There's so many great things and there's so many challenging things, but God will always be faithful. So don't quit. Don't give up on him. Joseph had a lot of setbacks, but they were really all about a setup for what God wanted to do to fulfill that dream that he put in Joseph's heart when he was 17 years old. It was all about the fulfillment of a God dream. Well, this whole journey started with a dream. It started with a God-given dream in Joseph's heart. And when you have a dream that's of God and it's for God, well, that's a road trip worth taking. And we've learned a lot together in this road trip as we have together learned life lessons from the life of Joseph. And I hope that you'll take a lot of these lessons with you as you move forward in your life's journey. But this was not the end of the road, not in God's bigger picture. It might be the end of the study of Joseph's life, but Joseph's life was actually pointing somewhere bigger. In fact, all the leaders of the Old Testament, they were pointing towards something that was yet to come, someone actually called the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And he was going to come and be God's ultimate plan of salvation for the world, saving people from their biggest problem, and that was sin and death. And Jesus came, and we know so much about his life and how he brought life to people all around the world. And he's still bringing life to those who surrender their lives to him. In fact, if you haven't done that, there's no better day to do it than today. Give your life to Jesus and allow him to transform and change your life and your life's journey. Well, Jesus had a lot in common with Joseph. In fact, Joseph's life really points to Christ in many ways. If you look at his life, he was betrayed by his brothers. His brothers went on to become and represent the nation of Israel, the different tribes of Israel. It was the Israelite people among whom Jesus was born that eventually rejected him and eventually put him to death. And Joseph was rejected by his family as well. But Joseph eventually went on to rule over his family, as obviously Christ has done as well. And then Joseph went on to forgive his brothers. That's a part of the story we didn't cover a lot, but Joseph forgave his brothers. Even when he had the power to take revenge, he didn't. He forgave and he loved. And that's what Christ does for us. Even though we're deserving of judgment, he gives us his grace when we ask. He gives us his forgiveness. And that's the amazing thing about Jesus. Well, You might feel alone in your life's journey. As you move along from where you are today to where you're going, you might hit some tough spots like Joseph did when he was sold out by his family, when he was left in the bottom of a cistern, when he was sold into slavery or abandoned in a prison. But just never forget, God is always with you. And He can do amazing things in your life beyond what you can imagine. I mean, just look at Joseph's life, from a prison to a palace in a moment, because he was faithful to God, and God showed Himself faithful to Joseph. Now that vision wasn't just for Joseph. God wanted to bless Joseph so Joseph could be a blessing to others, and that's what He wants to do in your life. See, God knows how to do amazing things through our journey. He knows how to do amazing things through our life. We just need to see the bigger picture. Now, we don't always see the bigger picture right away. One time, Jennifer and I were walking down a street, and we looked into the window of a home. Their living room windows were wide open. The lights were on inside, so we could see real clearly what was happening. Well, the husband and wife were in there, and they were staring at a wall that we couldn't see, and they both had their hands in the air, and they were waving them violently, and we were thinking, what in the world's going on? Well, later we realized, they were playing with a Nintendo Wii. We just couldn't see the television. We only had a little piece of the puzzle, and to us it looked pretty confusing what was actually happening in that home. It's just because we couldn't see the whole picture. You can't see God's whole picture in your life right now. You only see a little piece of it. But if you'll just trust that God is putting all the pieces in place as you honor Him, as you follow Him, as you love Him, as you live for Him, with God being the foundation of your life and God being the future of your life, He's making a masterpiece. And that's really the final and most important lesson today, and it's there in your teaching notes. God knows exactly how to make a masterpiece. He knows how to make a masterpiece in your life, and He's making one right now. If you'll honor Him, love Him, serve Him, and follow Him, He'll do more through your life than you can ever imagine. Thanks for joining me on this trip. Right on.
Thanks for joining us at Church Experience Online. Please don't forget to check out the website if you'd like to get more connected, learn more, get your questions answered, or support this movement financially. You're now going to hear a Church Experience Worship original song, and we hope this gives you an opportunity to worship and reflect on what you learned today.